Hey everyone, long time no see. It's been a while since I've been active here on YouTube or in Sky Children of the Light. But in all honesty, I never really left. Sure, I don't play as much as I used to, but every now and then I pop in. Sky has been such a huge part of my life, especially when things weren't going so great. And let's not forget the amazing friends I've made along the way. Walking away from that? Pretty tough. I've been here since the early days. Back when the player base was small and Sky was all about exploring, vibing, and making new connections. And while the core of Sky hasn't changed much, there's definitely been a shift, if not in the game, then certainly in the player community. For a free-to-play game, keeping people engaged is a huge challenge. Once you feel like you've completed the game, it's hard to maintain momentum. And for a game like Sky, which is more about atmosphere and exploration than a grind for rewards, that challenge is even more real. TGC's solution? Constant updates, events, and cosmetics. Sure, that's pretty standard for most games, but Sky is different. It's about quiet, peaceful experiences, not dopamine rushes from grinding for the latest cape or mask. When frequent events and cosmetic drops become the norm, it feels a bit off. Almost like it's lost some of the magic that made us fall in love with Sky in the first place. Sky, Children of the Light, followed in the footsteps of Journey, TGC's most successful game, which completely shifted how people viewed gaming, focusing on social connection and emotional storytelling without violence or competition. Journey became a beloved title, but it was exclusive to PlayStation, limiting its reach. So when Sky was in development, TGC set out with a different vision. Not only to capture the emotional aesthetic of Journey, but also to make it accessible across platforms, starting with iOS. With almost 7 years into development, the decision to launch Sky on mobile upset some of TGC's diehard PlayStation fans. Many felt that this move showed TGC was chasing short-term fame and profits, straying from the artful experience Journey offered. Despite the backlash, TGC had a plan to release Sky on other platforms after iOS to ensure wider accessibility. Looking back, Sky was developed in two distinct phases. Initially, the game was intended to closely resemble Journey, with a linear narrative emphasizing emotional experiences and social connections. It seems that Sky was planned to be a paid app on mobile. However, during development, TGC realized that the mobile gaming market had shifted, and the success of paid games on mobile was dwindling. With the abundance of free mobile games, it would be challenging to stand out as a premium paid game. This prompted a major shift in development. Sky became a free-to-play game with in-app purchases and a season-based content model.
The development, essentially we made two games. We made a game that would having, I would call it the sequel to Journey as a linear experience. But then the market changed completely where nobody wants to buy any game on the phone, and then we have to change the game so that you can start playing for free, but essentially pay us later. And in order to do that, we had to change the game quite a lot.
Yeah.
This change raised concerns from longtime TGC fans who were skeptical that the studio was prioritizing monetization over artistic integrity. Many feared that by going the free-to-play route, TGC would sacrifice the emotional depth and aesthetic qualities that had made their previous games so impactful. Despite the concerns, Sky garnered significant media attention prior to its release. This was largely because it was the next major release from TGC after Journey, a game that won every gamer heart. With such high expectations, there was naturally curiosity about how Sky would balance its focus on social connection art and feeling with the need to generate revenue. In interviews, TGC's developers, especially Genova Chen, were proud of the in-app purchase model, often positioning Sky as an ethical alternative to other games that rely heavily on predatory tactics like discounts, FOMO, fear of missing out, and aggressive monetization strategies.
Yeah, I mean, if you really look at most of the games that makes you pay on the mobile phone, they take advantage of your weakness, right? And this is not just a gaming, this is everywhere, buy one, get one free. For limited time, if you don't buy it, you will lose this opportunity to get a discount. What is that? Fear of missing out, greed, and it is everywhere in this world.
However, the reality of in-game purchases is something many of us are all too familiar with. While TGC initially set out to critique and differentiate themselves from other free-to-play games with intrusive microtransactions over time, Sky has faced similar criticisms. The focus on cosmetic seasonal content and in-game currency has made it feel like it's moving away from the core values that were supported during development. What was once envisioned as an emotionally driven artistic game has in many ways become subject to the same pressures of monetization as countless other free-to-play titles. After the launch of the game at 2019, Sky didn't exactly blow up like some other games. It was more of a slow burn. The game found its footing and developed a loyal player base, and that game company, TGC, seemed super excited about it too. The player base was small but dedicated. I mean, it was so tight-knit you'd struggle to find a single bad review back then. The game was fresh, simple, and most importantly, peaceful. It didn't always ask you to sell out your savings in a microtransaction frenzy. You were just gliding around, meeting random strangers, exploring. Pretty much the gaming equivalent of a chill afternoon walk in the park. Game was released only in iOS platform, but TGC had already planned to release it in multiple platforms. So with a steady growth in dedicated fan base, it seemed Sky was making very good foundation for the future. But as small as the game was, a few voices did raise concerns about the grind. Getting candles back then? Yeah, you had to run the whole map for 12 to 14 candles, which took about 2 hours. People were getting burned out.
This is particularly the ones in beta. Do you have any plans in store to reduce the grindiness of the game? So I think trying to have like repeatable gameplay that is interesting and like rewards a performance in the game is something which we aspire to add more of to the game. I think it's fair to say. We have the race at the moment, but it's not really working so much like a race. Like there's definitely more we could put in there. And we have played around in the past with what we internally call performance-based quests. So some quests where the better you do or the more pieces you collect as you're racing around with others, the more light that you collect. And they're really interesting. They're very tricky to balance so that everybody feels good about them. But there's something which we want to get back into the game to add a little bit more variety because, I totally agree. It is a bit boring if you just turn up and are just doing the same thing every day and it's going to have the same predictable rewards. And I agree that like the game shines when you have to collaborate together and overcome some big obstacle. So I think the answer is we're looking into it and hope to introduce some new stuff.
I don't really understand the question, really.
I think they're just kind of a bit frustrated with the fact that like the main gameplay is you kind of turn up every day and just like light candles and I suppose the daily quests as well after a while. Once you know how to complete them, they become like a little bit, can be a little monotonous. And even just like the trading of light between friends. There's like I suppose just like a schedule you get into, and like the variety of rewards and risk and challenge could be a bit more day to day.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're working on.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Fast forward to 2020, aka what I like to call the golden age of Sky. This was the year Sky came out on Android, and suddenly there were players everywhere. Game had a decent player base with rising popularity and interest in game in early 2020s, mostly due to hype and release in Android. And of course, because 2020 was the year when we were all stuck at home, shout out to COVID-19 for forcing all of us inside, Sky low-key became a social life for a while. Sky became that escape from reality we didn't know we needed. It was the year where you didn't have to deal with outside world, just floating around, collecting candles, making friends, and pretending life outside wasn't on fire. Sky was also picking up all the awards, Apple Design Award, Pocket Gamers Award, and was getting almost perfect reviews, and the game was thriving. 2020 started with Season of Rhythm giving some of the OG cosmetics. Then we had Enchantment, which was basically Moth Season, as it saw a huge boost in new player, particularly due to Android release. Then we had Sanctuary with prettiest cosmetic emote and Seasonal Area, which is still, I consider, one of the best plays in Sky. And then this year ended with Season of Prophecy, which basically gave me an existential crisis. But hey, it kept us entertained during the apocalypse outside. Now, 2021, this is where things get wild. It started off strong with the Season of Dreams, which had great storytelling bugs, of course, because it's Sky, and the infamous developer with a pot on his head in the Season of Assembly. But what really rocked the boat was the Little Prince collaboration. It was the season where the interest to the game reached its peak. People went absolutely bonkers when the news hit, and for good reason. The area for that season was pretty dope. Cosmetic was kind of meh. But this season also started Sky's controversial trend: overpriced cosmetics. Like $25 for a cape? Really, TGC? But it worked, and 200 candles, sword pants, solely priced as mentioning it will never come back again. This trend seems to be increasing in Sky, but it was clear that collaboration equals to hype, and apparently money. But 2021 ended with a bit of disappointed with Season of Flight. We got a mountain with good enough events and cool out-of-bound and cosmetic area, but it wasn't good enough to retain many players and their interest in game, so it went downhill to Sky from there. 2022 started with Season of Abyss, bringing new mechanics and seasonal area than we saw in previous seasons. It was underwater. Then we saw a Season of Performance with stage and knockoff owl hair. Then came the Season of Shattering this season, however, had few complaints. I guesses from the early age of Sky players wanted season based on grilled and darker than what they were previously playing. So this seems to be an answer to those questions. But this season, well, had no moats and cosmetic were mid, had no interesting areas. So some players were disappointed with this season, but within few weeks of this season, we got news of Season of Aurora, and we all know how it went. That concert was something else. TGC made Gunness world record virtual concert, and all but some players were still kind of confused in what direction this game was headed. We never had a human-voiced character on game, and game shifted to making more flashy stuff an event in-game rather than giving time to fix the game. How can TGC able to cramp 1,000-player in a single server, but have multiple bugs for an 8-player server? Then the news of $160 million investment came in light with players. This was great news for not only developers, but also for the players. Sky desperately needed more team member to fix increasing and consistent bug on the game. They even got co-founder of Pixar, Ed Catmull, as principal advisor and so on. After this, there seemed players could see major changes in the quality of life in game. But did it happen though? Yeah, it's hard to tell, but the in-app purchase, it seems TGC needs to milk this game to make their investor happy. But anyway, I didn't play almost at all during 2023, so I'm not going to say much from it, but it seems Sky stayed somewhat consistent during this year. 2024 started with another collaboration. By 2024, players were a bit frustrated with the condition of the game, and their patience began to wear off. But it is what it is. Then we saw nesting giving many players their long-awaited home space, and then Season of Duets focusing on musical aspect of game. But probably the new collaboration they have announced is big thing this year. 2024 saw 2 collaboration out of 4 season, with next season focusing on Moomins. My interest on this was increased due to the cartoon being my core childhood memory, as it was the only cartoon released in national television in our country, and we did not have access to multiple channels as we lived in remote area. I also still watch this cartoon 90s one in YouTube as a comfort movie or time, you get what I mean. So my interest was piqued for this. As I was looking at what is happening at the game, I was dumbfounded. Complain everywhere regarding game being unable to access for multiple days. Players becoming frustrated with game and TGC still copy and pasting the same response to the bugs and error in game. Many players are fed up with the half-baked game and are now showing frustration over it. Many players seems to calm down only after the response from Brian with a really nice response. The game at its core hasn't changed all that much, but the player base? That's a whole different story. Most of the veteran players we knew have already called it quits, and when I look at my constellation, well, it barely shines these days. It's kind of sad, right? And yet there's this growing chorus of players raising their voices to TGC about the same issues over and over. Cosmetic prices, bugs, and general frustrations with the game's direction. But fixing all of this seems harder than expected, doesn't it? Is it because they're short-staffed? Their website has had hiring notices up for a while now, so it makes you wonder. But for a company managing to bring on the former head of Disney, but having short staff does not seem right. And for a game that boasts 250 million installs, how many are actually active players now? Is it 5%, 10%, or less, more? Who knows? I think the core problem might not even be the cosmetics or the bugs, though those certainly don't help. And the complaint regarding these has been in the game since early times. My opinion has shifted to focus on the gameplay itself. And no, I'm not saying the gameplay is bad. Not at all. But once you've completed the game, once you've spent some real time in Sky, you start to realize the loop you're stuck in. The daily grind is real. You have to show up in Sky almost every day if you want to make progress, especially for new players, which at this point really just means earning more cosmetics. That daily task list, it starts feeling like a chore. Most players probably don't even realize it at first, but having to log in every day for candles and rewards can slowly drain the fun out of the game. Over time, the routine becomes monotonous. New players especially are thrust into this cycle where it feels like their entire Sky experience revolves around farming candles with less focus on exploration or discovery. Other games have adapted to this reality. They offer weekly or even monthly tasks that give players more flexibility. It's a model that works because it allows people to hop in once a week, usually on the weekend, knock out a few tasks, and still unlock rewards. Yes, there are daily rewards, but they aren't substantial enough to make a big difference. Sky, on the other hand, doesn't really do that. Even for those who pay for the season pass, the grind is real. There's no guarantee you'll unlock the ultimate cosmetic unless you're playing somewhat regularly. My friends gifted me few season passes and still missed out on the ultimate gifts from 2 seasons because I just couldn't keep up. It's like Sky is clinging to this daily grind system, desperate to keep players logging in day after day. After a while, even chatting with friends becomes monotonous. I have trouble finding people who wants to chat. Most of them are rushing for candles, and most people show up just for grandma cakes. Most of the social place is empty. Some of the seasonal area are completely forgotten, and TGC trying to put new maps instead of making existing map more interesting kind of makes me think, It does seem unusual for a studio with 160 employees to push out updates that still have numerous bugs and unfinished features, especially when Sky Children of the Light is their only major live service game. Given that Sky is TGC's primary source of revenue, it's clear that a lot of their focus is on keeping players engaged and ensuring a steady income stream from in-game purchases. However, the changes in Sky, particularly around the shop and the in-game candle economy, suggest that TGC is trying to boost their daily active player count. Live service games often measure success through these metrics, and higher player engagement directly correlates with more opportunities for monetization, whether it's through cosmetic seasons or special events. The push for more daily playtime is a common strategy in many live service games, but it feels out of place in a game like Sky, which was originally designed to be a calming, meditative experience. This shift has likely contributed to some players feeling burnout or frustration with the daily grind, especially when much of the reward structure revolves around cosmetics and seasonal content. It's possible that TGC is feeling pressure from investors to maintain or increase profits, leading to the prioritization of daily engagement over addressing longer-term bugs or quality of life improvements. Unfortunately, this kind of approach can sometimes backfire, as it may alienate the very player base they're trying to retain, especially those who have been with the game since its early days and were drawn to its peaceful, low-stakes gameplay. The fact that TGC has hiring notices up suggests they may be struggling with workload management despite their sizable staff. It's possible that the developers are working on multiple projects behind the scenes, or that they're facing internal challenges in balancing new content releases with fixing existing issues. With TGC's recent heavy-handed moderation conversations feel bland. So where are we now? Even with all the complaints by me or any other player, Sky still holds on to that peaceful, calming essence that drew us all in. But between the overpriced cosmetics, constant bugs, and a direction that feels a bit unclear, it's definitely seen better days. Yet after 5 years, I think Sky's still that game you can always come back to. It's like visiting an old friend. You might not talk every day, but when you do, you just pick up right where you left off. The magic's still there, somewhere. And hey, maybe we're just waiting for the next golden era. Thanks for sticking with me through this little nostalgia trip. And of course, stuff I have said in this video is basically my opinion. You can flush down the toilet and never think about it. So there's that. I hope I see you guys very soon. Have a great days.